Hi, my name's Robert. I come to you as an automobile enthusiast that have maintained, serviced, and repaired my own vehicles in excess of 30 years. I've had a car that lasts over 400,000 miles. The current car that I'm driving has over 220,000 miles on it. It's a 95 model. So I hope you can benefit from the information I share. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, I'm getting ready to do the front brake pads and rotors on a 2000 Grand Marquis. I believe it's the same for all the Grand Marquis from 1998 to 2002. So that's 5 years vehicles. This one does not have any kind of special police package. So let's dig in. First thing I'm going to do is place the jack, take a little bit of weight off the tire. Then I'm going to take the hubcap off, break the lug nuts loose. Okay, I used the tool from the jack kit to pull the hubcap out. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my T to my cross to take those lug nuts loose, then jack the car up. On the other side of the car, I put a stop behind the back wheel, and sometimes good to put a stop in front of the front wheel just to help prevent the car from rolling in the event that something gives way. Okay, I got the wheel off. I got the jack stand placed, so I'm going to lower the car to put a little weight on that. Then I'm going to pull these bolts on the back side of the caliper on the top and on the bottom so that I get the caliper loose. Then I'm going to put something in there to compress the caliper so that I can get the caliper off of the rotor. As you can see, the rotor has two retainer washers on there. I'm going to spin one of those off and probably destroy the other one getting off so that I can get the rotor off of the wheel assembly. So let me go ahead and pull those bolts and come right back to you. Okay, I got the two bolts out of the back side of the caliper. As you can see, the rotor has some wear on it. It's got some grooves. These pads are totally gone. So I'm going to put this screwdriver down here and try to pry the caliper compressed a little bit so I can get these top of this caliper off and get these pads out. Okay, it was a little tricky compressing these pistons on this caliper, so I loosened the bleeder hose. Then I worked the screwdriver in there, tried not to bust this metal clip. I don't know if I need it. And I slowly compressed it while the fluid dropped down in a bowl I have under it. It looks like that's the only way I'm going to be able to get this half of the caliper off of the caliper housing. Then I'll probably have to take the rest of the caliper off to get the rotor off. So I'm going to just do one step at a time. We'll see. Okay, to get the caliper loose, I loosened the bleeder valve for the brake bleeder, opened it up. I wiggled the caliper a little bit to get it a little loose. Tried to pry a screwdriver in there. Now this part of the caliper was stuck to the pads. So once I wiggled it and I knew I had a constant flow of fluid out of the bleeder, I closed the bleeder so air wouldn't get in there. Then I took a screwdriver and I stuck it in here and I pried the top of the caliper off. Then I stuck it down here. I pried the bottom of the caliper loose. And I did tap on this before I did the prying to try to break that contact bond loose. So I pulled the caliper off. Now you can see the pistons there and the boots look like they're in good shape. So I'm going to stick a pad on there. Then I'm going to put a C-clamp to compress those pistons back into the caliper while I have that bleeder loose so that it lets that old fluid out. Then I'll add new fluid to the system. And I'll also probably bleed them as well after I do that. So I'm getting ready to stick a pad on here and clamp it down to compress those calipers back in so it'll fit when I put the new pads on. Okay, this is what it looks like with me having a C-clamp on there to compress those pistons, caliper pistons, and I have a bowl down on the ground catching the brake fluid that leaks as I have that bleeder open while I do that. That way I don't put any undue back pressure on the system.
Okay, I'm in the process of taking these little retainer clips off. If you want to try to retain those, you want to put a screwdriver on there like that and turn them counterclockwise and work them off until they're loose enough. Then you could turn them the rest of the way by hand. This dust cap is actually part of the axle. That rotor should slide over that, so you shouldn't have to mess with that. So let me go ahead and pull that retainer off if you want to reuse those and pick up from there. Yeah, I was right. The caliper is not going to slide off without removing this main caliper bracket. So I got 2 bolts. I got one there and one there. They seem to be 18s. So I'm going to break those loose using my 1/2-inch drive. So I'm going to go ahead and take those loose and pull this rotor off. Well, the deep well socket was too deep, so I had to switch to a shallow socket. Barely got that in there. It's on real tight, probably 38 foot-pounds. So I'm going to add a breaker bar to it to break those bolts loose. Okay, those 2 bolts in there were very tight. And once I got the bolts out, this piece just falls right down. You can see the 2 bolts there. From there, your caliper should just slide right over the wheel hub assembly. Now would be a good time to take a look at some of your suspension components. There you see I got a little sway bar end link that's worn out, top and bottom, the bushings, and then I got an upper control arm on this car that is worn out. Looks like that ball joint could be replaced by removing these 2 bolts, and that'll come loose by this. So I'm gonna talk to them about replacing that, and let me go ahead and get the new hub and put that on. It looks like this thing had some antisieze on it at one time, so maybe these rotors have been replaced once before. All right, let me go ahead and start putting everything back together. Okay, I've pressed this little retainer thing on there, stop the rotor from falling off. I just use a little thin socket that I use to install spark plugs. Just pressed it on there. These rotors in the package, sometimes they have a little coating on them, some kind of oil or something. You might want to use brake cleaner, brake parts cleaner to get that off both sides. Then on your bolts that go back in there, it'd be a good decision to put Loctite on those bolts to reduce the chances of them coming out. When I took those bolts out, I used a breaker bar, and it's a good idea to put on some heavy-duty leather gloves to protect your hands in the event that the wrench slips or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this bracket back on. I can see where brake parts touch. I'm going to put brake part grease on everything that the pads slide in and out on. Then I'm going to put the outside of the caliper on. Then I'm going to bleed the brake and put the caliper back together. So let me go ahead and move forward. Okay, so I put a little grease right there where pads will make contact to the bracket right there and on the inside. I put a little grease on the inside of that little shim vibrator piece of metal. That's the kind of lubricant I used. Then I'm going to use that antisieze there to put a little antisieze on the recess of the lug nut bolts. So let me go ahead and set these brake pads in here and get them secure. Now my brake pads, all 4 of them are identical, and they have these little paper peel-offs on them. Behind those peel-offs are kind of like a tacky rubber substance. If the pads don't have that, you would also want to grease the contact points between the pads and the caliper as well. But since it has that, that's an anti-seizing and an anti-squealing system, so you don't want to grease those parts. Just let that matted surface mate to that. Okay, I peeled those backings off the pads. You can see them. And the little pieces that the bolts go through and rub against the caliper there, I did put some grease on those parts. So I got both pads in place. I'm going to go ahead and fit the caliper lid over top of that and finish the assembly process. I'm going to go ahead and put those 2 bolts in there. Okay, I'm putting the wheel back on, which will hold the rotor in place tightly. And here you got the lug nut bolts. As you can see, this side of the bolt is flat. This side of the bolt has a nipple type on it. And on your wheels, you have a recess point. So you want to put these bolts in so that they point into the wheel, so they sit in the recess. Most people don't need me to say that, but just in case you do. And then you want to tighten these bolts down in a star pattern. You tighten this one, this one, this one, this one, then this one. But I'm going to go ahead and snug them down. Then I'm going to raise the jack a little bit to get the jack stand out from under the car. Then I'm going to lower the wheel onto the ground so that the weight of the car is holding the wheel. And then I'm going to tighten these bolts down before I lower the car the rest of the way. Then I'm going to put the hubcap on. But make sure you bleed the brakes before you leave this job, just in case some air got in the lines. That's it. If you got any questions, go ahead and post them there. The bolts that bolted the caliper on, the caliper pieces together, were 13 millimeter. The bolts that bolted the caliper frame onto the wheel assembly was a 18 millimeter, and I believe these lug nuts may be like a 21 or something like that. Let me see what my lug nut wrench says. Yeah, they're 21. I torqued the caliper pieces bolts together at 18 foot-pounds. I torqued the caliper mainframe bolts onto the wheel assembly 115 foot-pounds, and I'm going to torque these wheel lug nuts on about 75 foot-pounds. These are aluminum wheels. Thanks for watching. If you feel that this information was beneficial, please like it and share it with your social media friends. Go ahead and subscribe to my page so you will get notification of future videos that I post. You can feel free to visit my website, robertspinner.com, post questions, and thanks again for watching.